If you like the video, make sure to like, subscribe, and comment. For more videos like this. People, what urban legend, myth, or creature have you seen or heard that legitimately gives you the creeps? This one is pretty local to Loveland, Ohio, but I really like the Loveland frog. Back in the 70s, there were a few sightings of a weird humanoid frog that would scurry around on its hind legs. Eventually it was shot by police, who discovered that it was a large pet iguana with the tail cut off. Local newspapers played up the story big time. Goat Man. The idea that you don't know it was there until after it's gone is super freaky. I remember reading a story once about a group that went camping out in the desert somewhere and all sat around a fire at night. Out of the darkness, a man with a goat's head walks up to the fire and sits among them. They all carry on like it's not there but are all somehow aware it's there, but some kind of calms comes over them all. After a while, the goat man stands up and puts his hand on the shoulder of the man next to him, who also stands up. They walk away together into the darkness, and no one says anything. They remain calm, like nothing is wrong. Over the next hour, they slowly come to their senses that this wasn't normal and that some creature has taken their friend away into the night. Growing up in the mountains of eastern Kentucky, there was a legend about an adulterous woman who was murdered by her husband in the early 1900s. The story said that the husband planned a picnic for their anniversary, where they wore their wedding clothes and reaffirmed their vows. During the picnic, he confronted her about the affair and nailed her to a tree using railroad spikes. The legend said that if you were in the woods near the site, she would follow you until you crossed a stream, then she would just stand there sobbing, unable to follow any longer. I spent a lot of time in those woods with friends, and of course our imaginations ran wild. Well, when I was about 20, my grandpa was involved in relocating a cemetery in the area. He said it was boring work except for the time they moved a corpse in a fancy dress that had a hole right through her forehead. There's a local legend, the Bunny Man, that I am a teensy bit obsessed with. In the early 1900s, an asylum transport bus, I've heard of a prison transport as well, crashed, and everyone on board was presumed dead. But soon after, mutilated, half-eaten rabbit corpses began to show up, and not long after, a mutilated, half-eaten human body was found as well. Police eventually found the suspect, an escaped lunatic who had been hiding in the woods, but while in pursuit, the suspect ran across a railroad bridge to try to escape and was struck and killed by the oncoming train. Legend states that if you go to that bridge on Halloween night, the ghost of the Bunny Man will kill you. Oh God, he's right behind you. Run. Surprisingly, it's bullshit. But, there was a historical Bunny Man in the 70s, or 80s? I can't remember which. A young man and his girlfriend were doing what young people do when they park cars on deserted roads at night when a man dressed in what they called a bad rabbit costume ran out of the woods, told them they were on private property, and then threw an axe at them. A few weeks later, the police were called after reports of a strange, axe-wielding figure began to come in, and the responding officer found a man in, yes, a bunny suit, standing on the porch of an abandoned house. He did a classic crazy person rant and then started to chop up the house. The officer returned to his car to call for backup, and by the time he got back, the Bunny Man was gone. There's no guarantee that these incidents are related, as some have pointed out that the first sighting of the Bunny Man could well have been a Klansman who was trying to scare the kids away. At night, in the woods, in a panic, and with everything happening so fast, I can see how the mistake would be made, especially in pre-internet times. The second one just sounds like a bona fide crazy man, or someone who just wanted to fuck with people, or maybe the Klansman wanted to throw everyone off his little cottontail and have them write both incidents off. Or rednecks in the woods, this was the Virginia countryside, after all. We have an entire town-wide lore surrounding this massive, creepy-ass forest called Rugger Woods on the edge of town. It's the most obviously haunted place on Earth. Full of abandoned factories, warehouses, and weirdly placed infrastructure. One of the most peculiar things about it is that there are random items everywhere, TVs, bicycles, clothes, even cars and tractors, just lying about in the forest. It honestly feels like loot in a video game. It's said that if you want something, you will find it in Rugger Woods, provided that you are willing to look for it. As far as I can tell, the conjecture is true. Whenever I've looked for something practical in Rugger Woods, I've found it. There was one time I needed a new computer monitor, so I went hunting in Rugger Woods and had one within the next hour. Another time, I needed a space heater. I found it by nightfall in the woods. I've heard of other people finding way more crazy stuff, like functioning refrigerators and decently nice furniture. It wouldn't even be notable if the items were on the edge of the woods, because then we could assume that they were just dumped. But the fact that they are found deep within the woods at random locations makes it seem like something supernatural is at work. The corn goblin. So pretty much, the corn goblin lives in the corn fields and eats children, and if he is happy, you get a good harvest. Update: now that I'm not in school and can finish, he is said to stand around 7 to 8 feet tall but hunches over while walking in the corn fields, so he won't be seen. It is also said that farmers used to sacrifice their children for a good harvest. This was the reason that farmers had so many children. He is also said to have glowing red eyes and sound like a wild pig. After harvest, he hides in the nearby woods and sleeps in the winter until early summer. He also hunts at night. He was probably made up to keep children out of the corn fields. In my home state of New Jersey, we have a magazine that comes out every month dedicated to this great state's mysterious ghouls and oddities. My personal favorite is the New Jersey Devils, hence our hockey team. The story goes, it was said that Mother Leeds had 12 children and, after finding she was pregnant for the 13th time, stated that this one would be the devil. In 1735, Mother Leeds was in labor on a stormy night. Gathered around her were her friends. Mother Leeds was supposedly a witch, and the child's father was the devil himself. The child was born normal but then changed form. It changed from a normal baby to a creature with hooves, a goat's head, bat wings, and a forked tail. It growled and screamed, then killed the midwife before flying up the chimney. It circled the villages and headed towards the pines. In 1740, a clergyman exorcised the demon for 100 years, and it wasn't seen again until 1890. The diction of the Jersey Devil. My friends and I had our own encounter of sorts. Back in high school, we went to a road haunted by a ghost called Annie Road, which is also home to Midgetville. As we explored the house we thought was haunted, as we left, there was a loud, blood-curdling scream that sounded almost like a pig or horse getting slaughtered. When we looked back, we saw red beady eyes looking right at us. Needless to say, we ran like hell and never went back. The scream is what many other accounts have described about the Jersey Devil. Northern VA Bunnyman Bridge. I've heard many different iterations of the story since I grew up here, but I'll tell you the most mythical and interesting one from my childhood. There is a very long and narrow underpass that sits below an old railroad. The underpass can barely fit a sedan car mirror to mirror, and being inside it invokes feelings of unease and claustrophobia. Legend has it that sometime in the 1800s, there was a prison transport bus that broke down near this bridge and had several inmates escape, but only one, a serial killer, wasn't heard from for weeks. That is until a couple of pedestrians noticed that rabbit bones littered the area around the underpass, and upon entering the dark tunnel, they discovered skinned rabbits hanging from the arch of the underpass. Police, assuming that the prisoner was surviving off these rabbits, scouted the area for several weeks, but he never came around. After a year had gone by and the police had long given up the search and moved on, people had been reported missing. A couple who had heard of escapees went to check out the old news. To their misfortune, they found the missing people hanging upside down, skinned, and bleeding dry, just like the rabbits. They shrieked in horror, and behind the bodies, they saw at the end of the tunnel a silhouette of a man with a bunny suit on and an axe in hand. They sprinted away, with the pitter-patter of the silhouette close behind them. They, however, managed to escape and immediately reported this to the police, who, again, never could find him. To this day, no trace of him has been found, and if you walk the Bunnyman Bridge, you can hear him scurrying above you on the foliage that surrounds the railroad. I grew up in a small town called Klamath Falls, Oregon. We had an urban legend about the old OIT building. Anyone from Oregon has probably heard of OIT, Oregon Institute of Technology. It's a pretty decent school if you're this row of homes off one of the side roads in the area. If you go down there, I can't remember the name of that particular road, you will find some large homes that are mostly completely abandoned. Of course, this gets the rumors going of ghosts or evil Native American magic chasing people off the land. In reality, the homes were built around the time asbestos was discovered to be hazardous. The whole area was littered with them. So the people who had those homes built up there got paid out by the city to stay away from there, and the homes just remained with no one living in them. Due to the eeriness of the area and the rubble of abandoned homes and buildings, it created great stories passed down for generations about hauntings and weird cult-like activity that happened out in the backwoods. There's a haunted street called Jake Brown Road. It has a super sketchy feeling because it just leads into the woods and slowly goes down a curved road to a single lane, deteriorated street that gradually becomes thinner and more dilapidated until you can barely drive your car down it. It doesn't go anywhere, just into thick woods. No buildings or other streets branch from it. Also, it never really ends, or at least no one has dared to travel far enough to see it end. Some people claim that if you follow the road on foot, you end up on another road, miles and miles away from where you would logistically end up. Others claim that the road leads to private property, where a mean old couple will chase you off with guns in hand. Out in the hills of rural Pennsylvania, there are lots of places few have tread. Deep in the hills, up several miles of dirt road, is a place called Card Creek. In most places, on a summer day, you can hear all the sounds of nature. In Card Creek, there is nothing but silence. Small pools of spring water between old oak trees and thorn bushes so thick they are nearly impossible to pass. Deep in these woods is oil. Back in the 1920s, surveyors went out into Card Creek to find it. After a night of drinking in a nearby town, one of the off-duty workers came back to camp. The dozen or so workers were not there, and the fire that burned in the center of the camp had gone out. The worker threw kindling and leaves on the coals to get them going again. When the fire came back to life, he could see the camp as it now stood. All the equipment was destroyed, and shacks were pulled from their foundations. Half-eaten meals were thrown about, along with shoes and scraps of bloody clothes. The worker grabbed his rifle, picturing a great bear making its way through camp. That is when he noticed the drip on a cast iron pan. Looking up in the newly kindled firelight, he found his 12 co-workers impaled on the tree branches above the camp. He did the sensible thing and ran. When he eventually found the sheriff and convinced them to go to the camp, a few days had passed. The bodies were gone, but the blood remained, leading a trail deeper into the forest through the thorns. No man dared to follow the trail deeper. Been there. I saw the well site and the destruction, or what is left of it. I also saw the dark forest full of thorns, and it is weirdly quiet there. There are a few other stories about people going missing there and being found impaled on the branches 20 feet above the ground. No one has ever claimed to have seen or heard the Card Creek monster themselves. Locals believe it lives out there and avoid the area. Those that are no better don't make camp near Card Creek. I'm Indo-Caribbean. We have tons of folklore. One in particular scares me because I'm pretty sure I've seen it for myself. It's called an Oligigu and is basically a woman who kidnaps children. She's a witch who lives alone in rural areas with a horrible looking face, hunched back and all. It has something to do with African influenced voodoo and stuff like that. I remember once, on vacation, we were driving through the countryside. The minibus stopped at an intersection where an old, abandoned looking house was, and the driver locked all of our doors. Then I noticed a beggar looking woman wearing a heavy trench coat. Naturally, I stared because it was about 100 degrees outside. All of a sudden, she looked directly at me with her glassy eyes and started screaming while rushing towards the van. She was screaming angry gibberish. The driver took off and told me never to judge an Oligway again because they can read your thoughts. In New Jersey, I grew up hearing some terrifying things. The one that scares me the most is the story of Annie's Road. The version I was told was, a girl named Annie was waiting to be picked up by her boyfriend. They got into a horrible argument, and he kicked her out of the car. She walked home by herself until a bunch of drunken sailors offered her a ride, ended her before throwing her body onto the road and driving away. It is said that at night, she will appear as a hitchhiker, and when you pick her up, you will lose control of your car. Or, if you swerve to avoid her, you'll crash and die. To summon her, simply turn off your headlights and tune into the oldies station. You should see her in the rearview mirror. Apparently, after her death sometime in the 60s, her father would come to the guardrail where her blood was splattered and paint it red every year in hopes that she would visit. My mother supposedly saw the guy painting it red once. The Devil's Tree is another scary thing in New Jersey that I won't dare go near. My family is all of Irish descent, and I'm fairly into all the associated lore that comes with it. Last November, I was driving across a moor in southwest Scotland at night. It was pitch black, and I know for a fact that nothing is up there. It was foggy, and accordingly, I slowed down to about 45 miles per hour. Now, I know that road like the back of my hand. It's not usually busy, and I hardly saw another car the whole journey. I became aware of a noise. I could hear it over the noise of the car and over the radio that I was listening to. I slowed down a bit more and turned the music off, but I could still hear it. I checked the mirrors and had a look around. I could see nothing. Getting curious, I put the windows down, which let me hear it clearer. The sound, which wasn't coming from any direction I could work out, was one of the most spine-chilling sounds I've ever heard. Imagine a sort of trumpet sound, but it's high-pitched and sounds organic. It's really hard to describe. It changed pitch but was loud. I covered 3 to 4 miles at about 30 to 35 miles per hour listening to this, and its volume or direction didn't change. It was like it was everywhere around me, an almost mournful keening wail. If someone told me that's what a banshee sounded like, I'd believe them. It was very disconcerting. I sped up as fast as I dared, put the windows up, and after a while, it just stopped. I've been up that road many times since, even stopping to look around, but there really isn't much up there. To this day, I have no idea what it was. My favorite one was local to where I grew up, outside of Worcester, Massachusetts. There was a cemetery called Spider Gates deep in the woods of a town called Leicester. Growing up, I was told that it was the most haunted place in the world. The story was that it was called Spider Gates due to having 8 gates you could walk through, each leading to a more sinister area. As you passed through the gates, the ground would tremble, the sky would go dark, hands would start reaching out of the graves, ghosts would follow you, voices would call for you, etc. And if you could reach the 8th gate without dying from a fear-induced coronary, you would be in hell standing at the river Styx. There was a witch who lived in a cabin outside of the cemetery as well. It was also the site of Satan worship, human sacrifice, you name it. This myth was very prominent, and everyone knew someone who had either died or gone insane trying to cross the gates. I knew a guy who claimed he saw statues crumble and then reform in front of his eyes. So when I finally visited the cemetery as a teenager, I was dismayed at the lack of hellish occurrences. It has one gate and is called Spider Gates due to the spiderweb pattern on the gate. It's a small, quiet Quaker cemetery easily accessible behind Worcester Airport. I found the cabin that the witch lived in, there was a guy mowing the lawn, and he waved. I still love that legend. Used to scare the snot out of me. A young man is driving down a dark, twisty country road when he sees a pretty bad accident up ahead and a girl in a white dress standing next to it, looking pretty shaken up. He pulls up and asks her if she's okay, and she says that she is, but she needs a ride home so that her parents can take care of calling the police, insurance, etc. The guy agrees to take her home, and they start driving down towards her house. During the ride over, they talk about a bunch of different things, and they really hit it off. The ride couldn't have taken more than 15 minutes, but the guy felt like they talked for hours and got to know each other pretty well. When he got to her house, he asked if he could see her again tomorrow, and she said that she would love that. He drove off after waiting for her to safely open her door and go inside. The next day, the guy shows up at the girl's house and knocks on the door. After a moment, the girl's mom opens the door, and he introduces himself as the young man who drove his daughter home last night and asks if she's home. The mother calls the girl's father over and asks the young man to repeat what he just said. By the time the young man finishes his story, the father appears to be extremely angry. He yells at the boy that he has no right to be there and that he should just leave, but the young man holds his ground and insists. He goes into detail about all the things he and the girl talked about and about how they have so much in common. This time, when the boy finishes his story, the father is no longer angry but is visibly shaken. He says, "Everything you've just said describes our daughter perfectly, but she died in a car accident 10 years ago today. She lost control of her car and crashed into the tree you say you found her at. We buried her in a white dress." In Chicago, we have a woman in white, who is seen sometimes along Archer Avenue, and sometimes she's even given rides by young men who encounter her on the road. They take her up to the cemetery gate on Archer Avenue and drop her off, and then they see her vanish at the gates. My grandfather told me that back in the 1940s, he was one of those young men. He became fascinated with her and started to research her legend. Supposedly, in the early part of the 1910s, before the Depression hit, there were these dance clubs that catered to young people who'd dance and party all of the time. The participants are probably what we'd call club kids today. Supposedly there was this girl who liked to go to the dance clubs and wore a white dress all of the time. She was a Polish immigrant, and there are some actual historical records that point to a few different girls who do fit the legend. One day she was running late getting to the club and saw that her boyfriend had gotten tired of waiting and was dancing with another girl. She decided to walk home along Archer Avenue. When he was done dancing, one of his friends told him how his girlfriend left in a huff. By then, she had already had a good head start. He got in his car and raced along Archer Avenue to find her. Archer Avenue was a lot more rural then, and there were no street lights. Legend has it he accidentally ran her over right at the gates of the cemetery, and to this day her sad ghost can be seen hitching rides along Archer Avenue. Many men have told about how they gave her a ride, always to the cemetery gates, where she vanished. I've never seen her myself, but Archer Avenue isn't what it used to be. I live and have lived for most of my life in the small town of Mechanicsville, Virginia, about 10 miles north of the lovely city of Richmond. Mechanicsville used to be a rural town, but it's expanding rapidly. When I was growing up, the nearby super malls and chic shopping centers were all farmland. Studley Road is a curving country road that runs east from State Route 301, winding its way past the few small schools in the area, diving in and out of the cool, shady woods on summer days, with small houses and fields when the woods gave way. In one of those small houses by one of those fields, a little girl lived, raised by her mother and father as an only child. Like all small towns, Mechanicsville has its share of delinquent residents, and her father was one of them. Essentially, the town drunk legend has it that one night he got drunk and a fight broke out, which ended in him beating his wife and daughter to death with his bare hands and then taking his own life with a gun. The women were beaten severely, and apparently the little girl's jaw was broken in such a way that it hung loosely from her face. Unknown to him, she ended up surviving for a bit. Unable to use the phone and with no neighbors nearby, she held her jaw to her face and made her winding way down Old Studley Road, the blood dripping down the front of her nightgown. She never found her way and apparently died by the side of that old road that fateful night. Legend has it that in one of those shady, cool turns into the woods, on certain nights, you can see the little girl walking slowly down the road to her neighbors or the hospital nearby to get the help she needs. It is said she always appears facing away from the spectators. The fateful few who have pulled over to help her supposedly report that upon shouting, they get no response. Approaching closer leads to her suddenly turning around and releasing her jaw, letting out a blood-curdling scream and gurgle from her broken face. Other versions say that when seen from the front, she seems to be covering her mouth in a coy, girlish laugh. Only when you get closer do you notice the blood down her front, where she releases her jaw and, of course, screams and gurgles at you through it. The legend is called the Studley Girl and has terrified me on late-night trips to or from my friends' houses throughout my teenage years and beyond. I live near a bunch of reservations and am actually half Navajo, the other half is white. My friends and I used to go Skinwalker hunting out near the reservation lands. One night we were out having fun in the middle of nowhere at about 1 or 2 a.m., and I decided to silently climb from the driver's seat to the back of my SUV and scare the crap out of my friends. It worked, and we all started laughing. But as I was starting to climb back into the driver's seat, I got a really bad feeling. I could have just hopped onto the ground and jumped back into the driver's seat, but for some reason I was terrified of that idea. When I got back to the driver's side window and swung my legs into it, my friend in the front seat randomly grabbed me and pulled me in the car as fast as she could. I never saw anything because it was very dark out. I then rolled the window up, auto-locked the doors, and drove away as fast as I could. None of the other people in the back had any idea what was going on or why I was driving like a bat out of hell. We got back to the main road and started heading back into town. I dropped everyone off except my friend in the front. She was really quiet, which was weird for her. When I asked her what was wrong, she told me that when I was climbing back into the front seat, she looked out the window and saw what looked like a person bent over backwards crawling towards me. After that night, I never went out there again. There's lots of stuff in Guyanese folklore. Baku, a small creature that is released upon the opening of old bottles, similar to a genie. When awakened, he hunts you down and throws stones at your windows. In the middle of the night. That's it. He lives off bananas and milk, and legend has it that if he is satisfied, he will answer any question you ask. Fun fact, in many rivers near Guyanese villages, there are a large number of bottles found discarded at the bottom. It turns out lots of the villagers threw out the bottles out of fear of these things. Moongazer, an extremely tall humanoid that only comes out at night. When he comes out, he goes into the middle of the forest and stares at the moon. Until dawn, when he disappears. That's it. He may also kill small children. These guys are especially creepy in Guyana, considering there are many tall trees around, and children often see a moongazer hiding among them. Old Higyu, this is a monster that, by day, disguises herself as an old lady and lives in your village. By night, she turns into a freaking ball of fire and devours newborn babies. According to legend, she was defeated by a group of children who set a trap under a newborn baby. They poured a gigantic handful of rice onto the baby. When the old lady flies in, she is forced to count the grains of rice for some unknown reason. If she loses count, she has to start over. She loses count frequently, and soon the dawn arrives, and all the children run in and beat her to death with broomsticks. The Michigan Dog Man. A cryptozoological creature allegedly first reported in 1887 in Wexford County, Michigan. The creature is described as a 7-foot-tall, blue-eyed, or amber-eyed bipedal canine-like animal with the torso of a man and a fearsome howl that sounds like a human scream. According to legend, the Michigan Dog Man appears in a 10-year cycle. Sightings have been reported in several locations throughout Michigan, primarily in the northwestern quadrant of the Lower Peninsula. The first alleged encounter with the Michigan Dog Man occurred in 1887 in Wexford County, when two lumberjacks saw a creature that they described as having a man's body and a dog's head. It has also been spotted many times in the Upper Peninsula by locals. Horses that had died of fright were found nearby, surrounded by dog tracks. The Rowan Oak Rake. It was my older brother who first told me about the famous 1587 lost colony of Rowan Oak when we were both in middle school. He relayed the common knowledge that an entire colony of more than 100 people had disappeared about 400 years before I was born. The only clue about what had happened to them was the word Croatoan carved on a fence post. My brother said that though no one from the 1587 disappearance was ever seen again, there had been other, earlier attempts to colonize Rowan Oak Island. Most had similar tales about people disappearing, and after one, only a single skeleton had been left behind, but there had been survivors. One in particular was a young boy who had related a tale about a crawling, pale white creature that came out of the woods. He had seen it one night when, after going to bed, it slipped from the shadows into his room and sat staring at him from the foot of his bed all night. It so scared the colonists that many of them packed up and ran for it, this boy's family being one of them. As they camped one night, the creature killed the boy's family. I'm an adult now, I know my brother was just messing with me and that there are no actual reports of any survivors or rake, but damn if it didn't scare the ever-living shite out of me when I was a kid. To this day, though, I feel very uncomfortable when I see things crawling towards me. My toddler son routinely scares the hell out of me. For those of you who don't live on Long Island, there's a town called Ronkonkoma, which has a really big lake in it. It used to be a really cool place to hang out and swim, but now it's way too dirty. Anyway, this is the story of the Lady of the Lake. Supposedly, Ronkonkoma was the name of an Indian princess who fell in love with a white settler who lived near the lake. Upon their meeting, the princess and the settler immediately fell in love, but their union was for at least one person has drowned each year in Lake Ronkonkoma for the past 200 years, the large majority of them male. Many others have reported being drawn by some unseen force out to the center of the lake, as if something was trying to drag them in. These souls have been able to resist the pull of the Lady of the Lake and have been lucky enough to live to report the existence of this strange phenomenon. The church in my village, Ireland, was supposedly built on the ruins of some kind of ancient pagan site where some fairly ducked-up rituals had taken place. Including, as legend has it, the sacrifice of children. That's probably bullshit, I don't think the pagan rituals involved that kind of crap. But some of the old folks here swear it's true. Anyway, there is genuinely a very weird vibe in the church. You walk in there and your hair stands on end, it's like the place is humming with static electricity. Sometimes, during Mass, the lights will start to flicker, or the priest's microphone will turn itself off and on again in rapid succession. The strange thing about that is that it only ever happens during the part of the Mass where he holds the communion up and says, "Body of Christ." He's had a couple of electricians in to check the wiring, but they've both said it's in good shape. Oh, and you can't bring a baby into the church during Mass, they go berserk, and not just the normal crying, real screaming, pure terror. Or pain. I've heard it's not nice. There's also a cool urban, village legend attached to the church. It goes like this. One morning, around Easter 1890, a young woman called Margaret Kinane walked into the church with her newborn baby, who was to be baptized in secret. The secrecy was because the child had been born out of wedlock, which was a major problem back then. Ordinarily, no priest would baptize a bastard child, leaving its soul tainted with sin, etc. The old priest at the time, however, had a reputation as a kind man and had agreed with Margaret that he would baptize her son if she brought him before sunrise, when he could perform the ritual in secret. When she brought the child to the baptism font, the priest was already there, dressed in robes and with a hood over his head. He quietly reached out for the child and proceeded to dip the boy's head in the holy water. Just then the church door opened, and Margaret looked around in fright, expecting to be confronted by angry villagers because of the illegal baptism. To her amazement, the old priest was standing in the doorway. He took one look at her and the figure behind her, opened his mouth to shout something, and fell dead. Margaret turned back to the baptism font to take her child from the impostor's arms, but there was no one there, only the dead body of her son, drowned in the holy water. They say her screams could be heard in the next parish, 5 miles away. It's only a legend, I know, but there's no baptismal font in the church. It's the only church in the county without one. And infants always cry in that church. Once, in the dungeons of Warsaw, lived Bazilac. It was a huge monster with wings like a bat, a tail like a crocodile, huge claws, and eyes that could turn people in stone with one look. Every midnight, he came out of the dungeons to eat people. During this time, the earth was shaking from his heavy feet, and wind was blowing from his enormous wings. The mayor said that he would give a lot of money to the person who killed the creature. Many had failed and turned to stone. One day, 15-year-old Mark, a poor boy from the city, told his little sister, Magda, that he would defeat Bazilac. The next day, she found her brother's statue. On her way back home, Magda was crying when she saw a mirror selling shop. A little voice in her head told her to buy a mirror and reflect the stone-making look of Bazilac. Magda ran into the dungeons, praying for the mirror not to fall down. Bazilac looked into the mirror and turned into a statue, and everybody that was made from stone was turned back into a human. Magda and Mark were happy together and got a lot of money from the mayor. People were happy that the danger was gone, and many of them sold parts of Bazilac. All that is left of the monster today is his crocodile tail, which you can still see in the dungeons, as a tourist attraction. When my sister and I were teenagers, we often walked through our rural neighborhood when bored. There was this one section of our street that got fairly woodsy, and there were paths that led into the forest. So one summer day, we're walking through that section, and suddenly these two little kids appear out of the woods and begin to talk to us. The thing is, they just don't seem to fit the time period we were in. This was the early 2000s, but these kids had big-time 1970s vibes. And something about them made them seem kind of faded and off-color. They kept telling us that they saw a bear and were looking for him. And they asked if we wanted to help find the bear. We declined and told them to be careful and maybe not do that. But they didn't seem to actually be listening to what we said and seemed to just be speaking without hearing us. We were obviously freaked out and took off down the street. We took many walks through the neighborhood after that, but we never saw those kids again. We didn't really talk about it again after that day either until years later, when we were like, remember those ducking ghost kids? It's become kind of a joke for us to be like, hey, ghost kids, to each other. But honestly, it has weirded us both out to this day. There's a creepy gravel road just outside of town, across from the local gas station, that meanders down through thick woods and then out to a field. As long as I've lived here, it's been referred to as Witch's Road. There's some kind of missionary Bible camp out there, over a metal gate and across another field, past some walnut trees, and over a little bridge. I've never seen the camp, but legend has it that it's not a Bible camp at all but rather some sort of strange cult, whose members live in the woods along Witch's Road. That legend has been around since the 1980s, at least. And no, I don't think it's a cult. That sounds like something people would make up in the 1980s. I went back towards it a little once, not too far, and while I didn't see any cultists, or buildings, for that matter, I did find a beautiful, huge tree growing at the top of a hill. When I got close to the tree, I found that the roots of it were stained, and the roots and ground in places had a thick reddish substance on them. I was with a friend at the time and didn't want to be all weird about it, but I have to admit that whatever the red staining was all around the roots of that big tree, it did look creepy as hell. I'll have to go back and get some pictures soon to see if the stains are still there. I used to live in a town that had a cult. The story goes that back in the 70s, two teenagers who were at the local Christian summer camp that basically owned the town wanted to rebel against the camp and their parents and went into the woods and started their own cult, even bringing more people in from the camp. The camp at the time was a nice place. So this cult was just a bunch of teenagers ducking off in the woods, getting high, drinking, and having a good time. They called themselves a cult to be rebels. Until they brought someone new in who was into the occult. This new kid brought them to this old cemetery that has a tunnel that runs under the road about a mile away and out into the other side of the woods. They went into the tunnel, and the kid brought an animal, a dog or cat, depending on the story, and they killed it. After that, everyone got into the occult, and there were a lot of rituals and animal sacrifices. Supposedly, those kids stayed at the camp and ran it today. Today, the camp is very creepy. Teenagers will try to bring you into the camp. My husband and I lived back in the woods for a while, about half-mile from the tunnel. At the time, we didn't have a car, but we loved to walk, and town was 2 miles from us, so we would walk daily. During the daytime, this area in which the tunnel and cemetery are located is very quiet, but at night it's loud, like natural wood noises but loud just in that one spot. The legend today is that the kids from the camp are in the cult and will try to bring outsiders in to sacrifice them. The cemetery is creepy as duck. When you go up there, you always feel like someone is watching you. And the tunnel? Well, I've only been once and didn't experience it, but my husband says he has. The story has it that if you go there at night, you can hear the screams of the cult's victims, which is what the loudness is. The Ventana Wilderness is scary as shit. It's pretty much a place that is said to be the crossing into the spiritual world, and after some of the things I've seen and stories I've heard, the main story that comes to mind is a girl that went backpacking out there by herself. She didn't see anyone the entire trip because it was pretty empty, but she was out there for photography, and when she developed her photos, there was a picture of her sleeping every night. Another one. Out in the Ventana Wilderness, there is a Boy Scout camp. The leader was about 70 years old and in decent shape. Every year, he would take this 3-day hike up to this place called the Window. And the window is said to be the place where the Esselen Indian tribe that inhabited that place believed the spirit world would cross over into ours. It's pretty much this canyon with mountains on both sides. The window is the open space in the canyon where you can ultimately see the blue sky. Anyway, the scout leader would hike up there on his own and write in this journal that was up there for when people reached the window. Normal people would write reflections on themselves when they get up there, but this scout leader would write SHT about aliens, and for the longest time nobody would believe him or were at least skeptical. Well, a few years ago, the guy said that he would record himself while talking to these aliens. So he hikes up, and when he comes back and plays the recording, it's blank. A week or so later, he dies from a heart attack while driving. Seem weird? Well, it gets weirder. The scout camp director decides to take all his documents from his cabin at the scout camp and make this library from them. It has the weirdest SHT, newspaper clippings and journals from talking with these aliens, divorce papers, and other weird stuff. Divorce papers are pretty normal, except for the part where all his friends say he's never been married. There are some ruins a few towns away from me in the middle of a patch of woods, just off a paved walking trail. The ruins belong to a mono-gendered mental hospital. Some people say it was a female-only hospital, some people say male. Apparently, the hospital closed down shortly after it opened and accepted patients due to the hydroelectric company that powered the facility shutting down. Legend has it that the owner of the hospital was the son of a multimillionaire medical tycoon who passed away after a few months of owning and operating the asylum. Upon inheriting it, it is said that he moved the patient wards into the underground portion of the hospital and installed odd ground-level hatches for staff to enter the lower wards, which apparently went down 6 stories. It is said that the day he got the letter from the power company, he began to make plans to sell the property, but due to its scenic location and the absence of a power company willing to run lines all the way out to their location, he could not get a profitable offer. On top of severance for employees and patient rehoming fees, the son became overwhelmed with the staggering losses he would face. It's said that one day he requested that all the staff meet in the lower wards for a company-wide meeting. The son stood at the hatch door to the lower wards the day of the meeting with a checklist containing the names of all of his employees. Upon checking off the last employee on the list, he slammed the hatch door shut and locked it, leaving his hundreds of employees locked underground with hundreds of additional mental patients. I try to imagine the panic of the unprepared employees, locked underground for days, when suddenly every light shut off, ventilation fans ceased, and the electric locks in the mental patient cells became unlocked. 50 years later, when the building was knocked down to make way for the paved walking path, apparently some kids managed to stumble upon a strange concrete hatch door with an old rusty lock that was warped and mangled but still tightly locked. They came back at night with a crowbar and a flashlight and managed to pry the lock open, and the instant they did, the door flung open and released a horrifying odor and a slew of toxic gases. The boys ran home and told their parents. When the police got word, rather than investigate what lay beyond the hatch door, they decided to dump cement into the entrance and then dump even more cement on the hatch itself. I've been to these ruins before, and there is an extremely unsettling aura about them. In Maryland, look up the Blink Man. According to playground historians, if a person stands at the far side of the trestle spanning the Patapsco River at exactly midnight and if he or she possesses the strength of will to stare into Wilchester Tunnel without blinking their eyes for one uninterrupted hour, they will see Peeping Tom appear at the tunnel's far end. According to Jacob Boehme, a 16th century alchemist, Peeping Tom and his other worldly brethren are Flimmerngheists, or, in the common vernacular, Flickergeists, shadowy beings living on the periphery of vision. It has been theorized that Ilchester Tunnel serves as a sort of interdimensional focal point and that by completing the staring contest, this Flickergeist is drawn out of the shadows and trapped within the beholder's field of vision. However, as with all supernatural challenges, this one comes with a hefty price, for once Peeping Tom has been seen, he cannot be unseen. He appears at a distance approximate to the tunnel's far end, and every time the viewer blinks, Peeping Tom is still there, but one step closer. This continues until he's literally nose to nose with his prey and uses his long eyelashes to tickle his victim, forcing him or her to blink, and that's when Peeping Tom strikes. If one listens to local lore, many a foolhardy adventurer has performed the superhuman task of keeping their eyes open long enough to conjure Peeping Tom, but none are able to then keep their eyes open long enough to survive an attack. Victims are typically found dead from heart failure, literally scared to death. Southwest Missouri. We have the Joplain Spook Light, an unexplained orb of light that sometimes appears on a specific country road at night. I think the most common explanation is that it's car lights being reflected from another road, but the earliest photo of this light predates automobiles, so who knows? I went to college earlier this decade in Joplain, Missouri. During my first semester, There are all of these activities happening to help freshmen get acquainted with the school in the area. One such activity was to go find the Joplain spook light. Now, I'm a scaredy cat for anything horror related. I hate horror movies, but I love anything creepy, urban legends, etc. My friend and I decided to sign up. We met at the school at the scheduled time at night. Enough people signed up that they were taking 3 large vans. We all pile into the vans, and they drive us out to see the light. We got out to the area at about 11 p.m. We're allowed to walk about a mile up and down the road from where we parked, but everyone was required to have a partner. My friend and I stayed together. Everyone stayed out there for a few hours. At one point, we, and a few other people, walked by this house where these 2 Amish ladies lived. They are outside, in their full Amish garb, holding lanterns and chanting. They're talking about how the devil is going to get us. We mostly ignored them, but it was pretty creepy. After a few hours, it's time for the group to leave. A few people claim to have seen it. My friend and I don't see anything. It's about 2 a.m. We all pile back into the vans. As we're about to leave, suddenly, about 10 to 15 police vehicles crest the hill. There are no sirens, but they all have their lights going. They completely surround us. We're scared shitless, but our guides get out of the vans to talk to them. The Amish ladies had called the police. They always do when people are in that area for the spook light. The closest officers to the area were on their way to set up a sobriety checkpoint somewhere, so they all decided to come investigate the call for shits and giggles. They already knew that a group from the school was going out there that night. After the guides spoke with them, we were free to go. My friend and I got home around 4 a.m. At the end of it all, we were more disappointed than anything after not seeing the spook light. When we were in the moment of everything else happening, we were definitely creeped out and scared. I've been trying to talk my fiancée into going to find the light again sometime soon because she's into the paranormal as well. However, I think we might not be willing to go without a group. So in my very little and unknown part of Germany, there's this story I want to tell you. The legend of the Teufelskanzel, the devil's pulpit. This was the time of year when the witches gathered at the Brocken/Blocksberg, a mountain in Germany, to celebrate Witches' Sabbath. The devil was there, of course, and told everyone how strong he is and what a cool devil he is. And as he told me, he was standing on a huge rock. After he had finished his speech, the witches told him that if he would be as strong as he told them, he should take the rock he used as a pulpit moments ago and carry it on his tail to the Hohe Meisner, another mountain, without a rest. He said nothing easier than that, picked up the rock, and away he was. He flew with great speed and thought he would be done in no time and back at the Blocksberg to celebrate further. But apparently, the rock got heavier and heavier with every meter he flew. And at some point, he decided he needed to rest. So he watched to see if anyone was nearby, and as he couldn't find anyone, he laid the rock and himself down in the forest underneath him. The witches, on the other hand, thought of this possibility and sent 3 of their kind after him to see if he could keep his promise. They found him sleeping and began to laugh at him. He awoke and was furious as to how in holy hell they could assume he wouldn't keep his promise. He went in the air with anger and ripped 2 of the witches in half straight. He grabbed the last one and went to the bottom of the valley underneath him. His horse legs stretched downward to crush the witch at the bottom of the world. And that's why the river in the valley, the Werra, is shaped almost like a horseshoe. The Devil's Rock is still there today. Right behind the forest behind my house. And is known to this day as the Teufelskanzel, the Devil's Pulpit. Living in Upper Michigan, you hear a lot of urban myths and whatnot. With a lot of Chippewa and Cherokee bloodlines and the massive amount of hunting and camping that happens here, the majority of them deal with nature and mythical beings. The one that comes to mind is of a man or beast that had the head of an elk and the body of a man. The myth is about a spirit that will follow you from a forest you visited back to your home, and it will peer into the windows of hunters at night. The only way to get rid of it was to properly thank the earth for whatever you just hunted. Obviously, it was shared to promote respect for the land and the creatures that inhabit it. I remember hearing it as a kid and it freaking me out a lot. I don't hunt, but I fish a bit. To this day, I make sure I respect the animals and the land. Cleaning up any sort of trash on the ground and using the entire animal instead of wasting it. A legend dating back to 1775 speaks, there in the cabin were more bodies, a frozen woman holding a dead infant in her arms, a sailor holding a tinderbox, as if trying to manufacture some semblance of warmth, and there, at the desk, was the ship's captain. One account tells of how his face and eyes were covered in a green, wet mold. In one hand, the man held a fountain pen, and the ship's logbook was open in front of him. Captain Warren leaned over and read the final entry, dated November 11, 1762, 13 years prior to the ship's discovery. "We have been enclosed in the ice for 70 days, it read. The fire went out yesterday, and our master has been trying ever since to kindle it again, but without success. His wife died this morning. There is no relief. Captain Warren and his crew were so frightened by this encounter that they grabbed the ship's log and retreated as fast as they could back to their own ship. The Octavius was never seen again. Imagine being there. Slowly dying of the bitter cold and watching others die around you. Looking down at the blue face of an infant that will never reach adulthood. Realizing there's no hope of escape. That gets me more than any kooky, spoopy urban myth. I was driving a shortcut from 29 Palms, California, to Albuquerque, New Mexico. 29 Palms is located in the desolate high desert east of Los Angeles. The shortcut was a 2-lane road through total nothingness, except for passing through Amboy, California. Amboy is a nearly abandoned town nearly as far below sea level as Death Valley, with a dormant volcano and lava field on one side and a salt flat on the other. It was also, at the time, a hotspot for satanic group activity. So I was driving by myself in the afternoon. I stopped in Amboy and snapped a picture of the city sign, just to prove I was there to friends who dared me to take that route to I-40. I got back in my car and proceeded to drive up into the mountain range between Amboy and I-40. Once I reached the top, I am driving north through a canyon with high grass on both sides of the road. Up ahead, I see some stuff in the middle of the road. As I approach, I slow down to see a red Pontiac Fiero stopped sideways across both lanes, a suitcase open with clothes scattered everywhere, and 2 bodies laying face down in the road, a man and a woman. I stop 100 feet or so away, and the hair on the back of my neck is standing up. Being a Marine, I reach under the seat and pull out a 9mm pistol and chamber a round. Something seemed very wrong, it looked too perfect, as if it were staged. An ambush? Was I being paranoid? Something was just wrong. Getting out of the car seemed unthinkable, it was a horror movie move. As I scanned the road, I saw a line I could drive. Past the guy in the road on his left, swerve to the right side of the woman, behind the Fiero, and I'd be on the other side. I dropped it into first gear, punched it, and drove the line I planned. I passed the back of the Fiero without hitting it or either of the bodies in the road. I continued forward a couple hundred feet and slowed down so I could breathe and let my heart slow down. As I looked up into the rearview mirror, I saw that the 2 bodies had gotten up to their knees, and 20 or so people emerged from the tall grass on either side of the road by the car and bodies. At that moment, my right foot smashed the gas pedal to the floor and did not let up until I had to slow down for the I-40 East on-ramp. I will never know what would have happened to me had I gotten out of the car to check on the bodies or stopped my car closer to them. Somehow, I do not think it would have been good. Sometimes real life can be scarier than a movie. There were quite a few. A place called the KKK Dome existed behind the town's cemetery. I think it was the ruins of an old water treatment plant that was long since deserted. Basically, it was a concrete wall at least 8 feet tall that was in the shape of a giant circle, probably at least 150 feet from one end to the other. One rumor that gave the place its name was that supposedly the clan met there and conducted ceremonies. I don't believe it was actually true, but once, when exploring the area, someone found an old metal cage out in the middle of the woods. That gave everyone ideas of people being kept in cages out there and being killed out there. I can't explain the cage at all in the context of an old water treatment plant, but I don't think there was really anything notorious about the place. There was also a place out in the country called Dead Man's Hill by some. It was next to where an old railroad crossing used to be. The story went that a kid was in his truck crossing the railroad long ago and that his truck stalled on the tracks. Soon, a train came and killed him. The legend became that if you would park in front of the old crossing and put your car in neutral, his ghost would push your car up the hill and onto the tracks so that you could join him in the afterlife. Now, legitimately, this one did work. The way the land is around the area, it looks like you are being pushed uphill for a bit and up onto the tracks. It was really just an optical illusion, though. The second part of the legend was that if you put flour on the hood of your car, you would see his handprints appear as he pushed you. You can imagine the time we spent tricking kids younger than us by making them look away while we put handprints on the hood after the fact. Come to think of it, these stories really go on and on. I'm from rural Illinois, so there wasn't much to do. Stories told around the fire at summer camp always affected me the most. The story of the watermelon baby stands out. The baby grew up with abusive parents who kept him locked up in the basement and only fed him watermelon every few days. Once he was older and harder to control, they allowed him to attend the nearby boys' summer camp. Due to neglect, he looked decrepit but had a massive head with a vertical scar resembling a line on a watermelon. He was incessantly teased for his looks, which ultimately prompted him to kill his fellow campers and counselors with an axe after a midnight gathering. What made this creepy and realistic to me was that my camp had a lodge with pictures of all campers dating back to the early 1900s, and one kid from the 20s had a massive head with a very similar looking scar and scowl on his face. The story was that this was the only summer the camp had to end early. There's also an island close to the camp with a visible cabin where the watermelon baby still resides to this day. New counselors are selected to row out to the island at night to deliver the watermelon and deter any future murders. I heard this at a camp in New Hampshire, and I believe it has been told in other states. I can't say it was the most original story, but damn, staring into the eyes of that kid in the picture made me a believer. Something about being away at summer camp as a kid makes you want to believe these stories are true. I used to always get creeped out by a story my dad used to tell called the West Point Light. My father grew up along the Rappahannock River near Saluda, Virginia. There's a nearby town called West Point that we used to drive through on our way to the Urbana Oyster Festival every year. It was a family tradition for a lot of years and had been a big part of his teen and early adult years too. Anyway, West Point is kind of industrial. It's where the York River and Mattapony meet, and there is a big paper mill and some train tracks for bringing in trees to turn into wood pulp. Anyway, the legend goes that on a foggy night in the 1880s, a train was coming through town when it suddenly derailed. The only casualty was a single crewman who was decapitated in the accident. His head was found next to his still illuminated lantern. Nowadays, on humid, misty nights, people have reported seeing a mysterious light bobbing along the tracks. Some report that it looks like a dim flashlight that will come and go as you watch it. The belief is that it is the crewman walking the tracks with his lantern, searching for his missing head. My dad said he and his high school buddies went up to the tracks once to see if they could see the light, which they did, promptly shattered themselves, and got the heck out of there. The Weeping Woman. This is a story that the old ones have been telling to children for hundreds of years. It is a sad tale, but it lives strong in the memories of the people, and there are many who swear that it is true. Long years ago, in a humble little village, there lived a fine-looking girl named Maria. Some say she was the most beautiful girl in the world. And because she was so beautiful, Maria thought she was better than everyone else. As Maria grew older, her beauty increased, and her pride in her beauty grew too. When she was a young woman, she would not even look at the young men from her village. They weren't good enough for her. "When I marry," Maria would say, "I will marry the most handsome man in the world." And then one day, into Maria's village rode a man who seemed to be just the one she had been talking about. He was a dashing young ranchero, the son of a wealthy rancher from the southern plains. He could ride like a Comanche. In fact, if he owned a horse and it grew tame, he would give it away and go rope a wild horse from the plains. He thought it wasn't manly to ride a horse if it wasn't half wild. He was handsome. And he could play the guitar and sing beautifully. Maria made up her mind, that was the man for her. She knew just the tricks to win his attention. If the ranchero spoke when they met on the pathway, she would turn her head away. When he came to her house in the evening to play his guitar and serenade her, she wouldn't even come to the window. She refused all his costly gifts. The young man fell for her tricks. "That haughty girl, Maria, Maria," he said to himself. "I know I can win her heart. I swear I'll marry that girl." And so everything turned out as Maria planned. Before long, she and the ranchero became engaged, and soon they were married. At first, things were fine. They had 2 children, and they seemed to be a happy family together. But after a few years, the ranchero went back to the wild life of the prairies. He would leave town and be gone for months at a time. And when he returned home, it was only to visit his children. He seemed to care nothing for the beautiful Maria. He even talked of setting Maria aside and marrying a woman of his own wealthy class. As proud as Maria was, of course she became very angry with the ranchero. She also began to feel anger towards her children because he paid attention to them but just ignored her. One evening, as Maria was strolling with her 2 children on the shady pathway near the river, the ranchero came by in a carriage. An elegant lady sat on the seat beside him. He stopped and spoke to his children, but he didn't even look at Maria. He whipped the horses up the street. When she saw that, a terrible rage filled Maria, and it all turned against her children. And although it is sad to tell, the story says that in her anger, Maria seized her 2 children and threw them into the river. But as they disappeared down the stream, she realized what she had done. She ran down the bank of the river, reaching out her arms to them. But they were long gone. The next morning, a traveler brought word to the villagers that a beautiful woman lay dead on the bank of the river. That is where they found Maria, and they laid her to rest where she had fallen. But the first night Maria was in the grave, the villagers heard the sound of her crying down by the river. It was not the wind, it was La Llorona crying. "Where are my children? And they saw a woman walking up and down the bank of the river, dressed in a long white robe, the way they had dressed Maria for burial. On many a dark night, they saw her walk the riverbank and cry for her children. And so they no longer spoke of her as Maria. They called her La Llorona, the weeping woman. And by that name she is known to this day. Children are warned not to go out in the dark, for La Llorona might snatch them and never return them. Small country town. Werewolf legends say that from time to time, some people, who are in fact werewolves living as well-to-do people, will gather and hunt at night, capture a person, generally an elderly man who won't be able to run away, and hang him off a tree, drinking his blood and howling in joy for the rare moments they are set free. Now the fun part, there are no wolves in the area, you can hear howling from time to time. The second fun part, there is a traditional hill where you many times would find elderly men hanging from trees. The legend is very old, as are several other traditions. From my own experience, I was 14 and was feeling restless or insomniac one night, so I went for a walk alone, in a very safe town. I was sitting on a bench looking at the stars and the road. The roads are cobbled stone as it's a very old town, Roman ruins, castle walls, all the works. When I heard the sound of hooves or claws on stone slowly approaching me, it was the first time in my life I felt so much fear I was paralyzed. In the corner of my eye, I saw a huge black dog, as large as a small donkey, then just started walking away again. Obviously, this was likely just a stray, but all the stories in my mind made me think it was one of the mythical werewolves. The other legend that comes to mind is that you can hear the town's patron beast, a dragon or winged serpent, whisper at night. In some areas of town, due to the castle walls, you do hear sounds that resemble whispers or murmurs when the wind is just right. It is said the voices will lead you to one of the hidden tunnels, and you might get lost forever. The Aarion. A Japanese monster that forces you to give it a piggyback ride, then either crushes you under its weight or makes you rich if you make it to your destination. Aarion is a child-sized monster from Niigata Prefecture who loves to ride people piggyback. It lurks in bushes and trees by the side of the road, and when a traveler walks by, it leaps out onto their back, crying out, Aarion. If the traveler relents and carries the Aarion on his back, the monster becomes heavier and heavier with each footstep, nearly crushing the traveler under its weight. In addition, this mischievous yokai chews the scalp of a person good enough to carry it, further adding to his misery. According to some tales, as the Aarion becomes heavier and heavier, it eventually crushes its victim under its weight. However, more commonly, when a person has dutifully carried the Aarion the whole way home, he or she finds that the strange burden was a sack of money all along and becomes incredibly rich.